Thank you very much, and welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. My name again is Jeffrey Davis. I'm host of Radio Entrepreneurs, also CEO, chairman of MAGE LLC, a management consulting firm. And I want to thank the law firm of Tarlow, Hart, and Rodgers, who is hosting us. That means to my left is Mark Furman.
Hey, Jeffrey, great to be with you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for hosting us. It's great. We do appreciate it. And our guest, returning guest, but first time at Tarlow Breed, Stacey Friends, attorney at Morse. Just says Morse here.
The recently rebranded firm of Morse.
Oh, that's why. Okay. So I know you do a lot of trademark law. Why don't you tell us about your practice?
Sure. I do a lot of trademark work for large companies and also a lot of small companies. The neat thing about trademarks is that everybody has one, basically, no matter what kind of business you have, whether it's a service or you have some kind of merchandise or goods. You probably have some kind of trademark or brand name for whatever it is that you have or that you're doing. So it's fun because I work with all kinds of people and companies. And the startups or the entrepreneurial people are fun too because they're coming in, and hopefully if they have brought me in right away, which I recommend, coming in on the ground floor, and I can actually help with the branding. Not so much on the creative side, that's not exactly my thing, but with the availability of whatever it is. And one of the worst things that happens is a company or an entrepreneur chooses a name only to find out that it's not available. Worst case scenario is they find out by a letter from somebody else.
Cease and desist
yes,
kind of letter.
Cease and desist letter. That does happen, and that's really unfortunate because you're instantly on defense, and you have to deal with that, and that costs money to deal with that. So
Sure.
I know that sometimes when people are starting a business, they don't maybe want to invest in that. It seems sort of secondary to other things that are needed to get the business going. But the name, your brand name is super important. It may be more important than other things if you think about it. And if you don't put some time and attention into it in the beginning, you may not be able to do what you wanted to do, or you may be spending unnecessary money later rather than just sort of preventive money in the get-go. So that process usually, just in brief, that process usually starts with a search, and that's to make sure that their idea is available. There's no sense in going forward and spending money on something if it's already taken, and you'd be surprised. We're sort of running out of words, So
It's
that's
funny.
the first thing that we do.
I used to go to board meetings for my first 10, 15 years in business, and it was more common that people would introduce me saying my first name and my company name is my last name. They didn't know my last name. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. They'd say this is Jeffrey Mage, and I
Yeah.
go, no, it's Jeffrey Davis.
Yeah.
So I do know how important names can be. I was a marketer, originally in my career. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm a big fan of, you have to be identified with something, but you don't want to lose it if you've invested in it, identifying with
Right.
something.
Right.
And that's the key, isn't it?
Exactly. And if you think about it, although the large companies, they spend
Billions.
a lot of money, at least maybe in the thousands, tens of thousands, engaging people like, yourself. If you did brand development, somebody who can come up with these concepts and these marks and these ideas, and then, but all that has to be searched, right? They're going to clear that and come up with something. So it's not at that scale for a small business or startup of some kind, but it still really has to be done. You have to come up with a name for your company or your service. If you have software, you have an app, whatever it is you have to come up with a name for it. And, the more unique you can be, the better off you are, the more likely it's available and so on. So that's, I can do that kind of counseling if I'm in on the ground floor. Sometimes they've just sort of gone ahead with something and then there's a problem. And then they really have to go back to the drawing board, and now there's sort of money wasted. So,
We were picking a name for a client about a year and a half ago at my firm, even though, we don't consider ourselves a marketing firm. We were involved in the strategy, and we picked a Latin name. And we had to deal with the trademark attorney on a Latin name,
Yeah.
and it took a little bit of discussion to get the attorney to agree with us on
Yeah.
the name.
Yeah, that happens a lot, actually. I've had that happen to me, and I'm on a listserv for Trademark Geeks, and lots of people have that issue because the examiners at the USPTO are required to look at foreign equivalents, it's called. So if there's a translation, they have to take that into account. So just by putting something in another language, you don't avoid a conflict. It's considered equivalent. So the way certain examiners interpret that, sometimes it's really, there have been I've had some crazy office actions from the USPTO where they, I had one recently where they chose, what was the language? It was something really obscure, Serbian or something like that. They were trying to say that the mark was descriptive because in Serbian it meant something, that was related to what they do. I'm like, okay, first of all, there's 5 different meanings, and that's only one of them. And who speaks Serbian? Like, it has to be a very common language for that really to work. But anyway,
sometimes I'll change it, create a new word out of what
Yeah.
was an old word, and sort of modernize it so that's.
Yeah, they're supposed to, just use sort of, well-known languages or common languages, but they don't always do that, unfortunately.
So, before the mics were on, we started to get into China, and that's in the news every day, and it's on the minds of a lot of people I talk to in business.
Yes, it is. So an interesting thing going on in my field specific to China has to do with the process of getting a trademark registration with the USPTO. The USPTO very recently just changed their rules, which is a huge thing for a government agency to change a rule in the first place. They changed it pretty quickly because they were dealing with this huge influx of trademark applications coming in from China. By the dozens and hundreds of them. And in fact, somebody on this listserv that I talked about looked up how many were filed the day before the rule changed, and it was hundreds filed on one day before the rule changed. And the rule change had to do with specimens of use. And what that means is when you file for a trademark, in order to actually register it anyway, you have to prove your use. And so you have to submit something to the USPTO that shows your use. It's a website that shows the mark. If it's services, if you have clothing, it's the clothing with the mark or a tag on the clothing with the mark. So what's been happening with these Chinese applicants is they've been filing dozens and dozens of trademark applications, and then they're sending in fake specimens. So what a lot of people do, and I just dealt with this recently, actually, they take like a stock photo from online, all those sites that have stock photos. They take a stock photo of, a model in a T-shirt or something, and then they put their own image on that model, and then they send that in as the specimen of use. And the USPTO wasn't really wise to it for a long time. People have actually been doing it for a while.
Right, I used to do it for jokes.
Yeah, so they weren't really paying attention, and
Right.
then people started complaining because, people like the case that I have a bona fide, like in use, trademark applicant, and their application was refused based on another application or registration. Did it register? And when I looked into it, the specimen was clearly manufactured, clearly a fake specimen using they had a bottle, like a beer bottle, and you could tell that it was fake because the label on it was just flat. It wasn't curved around the bottle. It just was flat on the bottle. And I was like, this doesn't look right. So my client actually, because it helped him also to not pay me to try to find stock photos. But if you can find the actual stock photo online, then you can report that to the USPTO. And that's relatively new too. It's still called a pilot program. But this is how bad the situation has become. And it's not all Chinese applicants, but a huge majority of them are coming from Chinese applicants.
But isn't it just it's like the needle in the haystack. There's billions of people in the world. Everything is on the web. Everybody's downloading all the time. Isn't it really hard to just monitor? I mean, maybe, I know you're still breaking the law, but isn't it really hard to track this properly?
Yeah, I think it's certainly hard to track and deal with the use of it, but the applications now between the pilot program where other attorneys or other applicants can report other misuse. And now the USPTO examiners have a new rule, for them to really look at specimens and be aware of this huge, huge problem. So I think it will get better because that's their job. And I can attest to the fact that they do pick apart your application. I mean, if there's something wrong with your application, they will find it. So now that they know what they're looking for and they have this mandate and a new rule behind them, I'm hoping that they are sort of denying more of these, applications. And I don't know what will happen with the foreign applicants when they get an office action, because you can't, you can file in the United States through a treaty, but you can't do anything else. So if you have a problem, you have to hire a U.S. lawyer, and any U.S. lawyer worth their salt is going to say, hey, I can't really defend this because you've submitted fake specimens. You have to have real specimens. And I'm going to bet $1 million that almost none of them will or do. So,
well, again, I think, going back to China, the United States, trade, economic growth, it's going to be, I think, at the forefront of a changing world over the next 30, 40 years. So it's something to watch.
It is something to watch, and it obviously has to be dealt with.
Right.
It makes more sense to deal with it so it's as advantageous to us, or at least equal. But this, and that's, when you think and wonder, like, why are they filing all these applications? Like, it almost doesn't really make sense.
Just look at how many people graduate university there for every one that graduates here. You're looking at just a staggering differential, and it's going to change the playing ground. But that's not what we were talking about today. We've been speaking with Stacey Friends, attorney at Morse, with Mark Furman from Tarlow, Hart, and Rodgers. Stacey, if someone wants to find you, clearly an important topic for anyone in business, how would they find you?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I can be reached at my email at Morse, right, which is sfriends@morse.law. We just moved into new offices. We're still in Waltham, the main office. There's a small Boston office and a Cambridge office at CIC. But we literally over the weekend just moved into a different building there at City Point in Waltham. So we now have a big, gigantic lit letters inside the lobby that shows. So hopefully it's easy for people to find us there.
Right. And you're going to come back again. Great. We hope you are. And
yeah,
talk
I'll
again
come back
us.
again, and I can report on how the trademark system is working or not.
Right.
Hopefully working.
Maybe get into copyrights as well.
Yeah, that's another issue, mostly kind of on the infringement side.
Well,
yeah.
we made a note of that, so we're going to get you on the
Next time.
copyrights next time. Thank you, Mark. And we're going to take a break. Remind everybody this is Radio Entrepreneurs at the law firm of Tarlow, Hart, and Rodgers. We'll be right back after these messages.